Okay, we are back with Kiko Gomez. We just talked about his idea of a student bill of rights. We are now here to talk to him about the idea of just making public colleges and universities tuition free in general. I think this is the bigger potatoes if we're talking costs when someone's going to try and get that education, even compared to the textbooks. Why do you think that this is the area we need to be looking at right now for education reform? Why is that the big thing to
So,
tackle?
yeah. So, hi everybody, welcome back. um, so, um, as a student advocate for nearly almost close to 10 years, the the major problem that I've always seemed to have, not as a student and then other students who come up to me, is the cost of tuition. And one of the exciting things about this year's election is we're talking about the viability of having public colleges and universities be free. And why free? Well, the cost of living across the United States has actually gone up in the last 20 years, and that's also a problem. That's also a problem as well when we're talking about going to school the first time. So when you go to community college or university, the price of tuition has skyrocketed about close to almost 40% in the last 10 years. I'm not really great with numbers, guy, but this is what I'm just guesstimating because I I haven't sat down and looked at all the numbers. I know you're the math guy, so um, but the reality is that students are suffering at the hands of these public colleges and universities, squeezing out their dollars just to pay for credits, basically. And sometimes some credits will go up to like $40 per credit, and other credits from different colleges and universities go up to 250. So you're basically getting robbed of a chance to just even go to school or put yourself into major debt right afterwards. You have to take out a student loan just to cover the cost of tuition and to cover the cost of out-of-living expenses. So one of the major things that in the discussion many people are talking about now is eliminating that cost uh, for public tuition in universities be gone immediately. And I think that's what was so popular right now with a lot of students across the United States is seeing seeing that tuition charge be gone. Like there'll be no bill being charged to them. They'll just go to school, sign up, and then let our taxes take care of the students going forward with the public colleges and universities.
So one of the things that I've always been curious about in the conversation about higher education reform is one of the things that happens most of the time is these people who end up in debt. They're not the people who are in debt from going to public colleges and public universities. And we already have a system where our public colleges and public universities are much cheaper and produce much less debt coming out of colleges. Why do you think that is the solution for the cost affordability too? Because it's not as if the services that need to be paid for suddenly become cheaper. I'm curious why you think that making it free is the approach to making it cost effective. Because I think there's a lot of demand right now where there's not even coming out of college with the results a lot of the times we want right now. We're seeing a lot of the people who come out of college getting the same jobs that people without a college degree are getting a lot of the times, or they're being left unemployed. So I'm curious, do you think that the free aspect of it is the first reform we need to be making to try and correct what's going on in higher education?
Um, I would say in a sense yes, only because of the fact that we're seeing a higher percentage of students being in debt nationwide, and then two, you see a higher percentage of students being homeless because they're basically paying out of pocket for the higher tuition costs. Because not a whole lot of students are lucky to even qualify for like say grants from public places, from like say from our government or from the state government or from other, I guess, private entities, such as like say Hyundai, where they offer a public tuition grant to pay for about a year or two of your community college experience. Uh, but the cost of living has gone up, and also the constitution has gone up. So we need to tackle the essential problem with tuition, which is we need to eliminate it so we can actually pool all of our resources with our own taxpayer money and audit it itself and say where does the money go in terms of paying these universities and public colleges. And one of the main factors is the student administration does not want to be audited whatsoever in terms of the student fees. And the student fees are a huge battle in itself too as well,
Yeah.
because you don't know where your money's going. And I was in a former community college, and I was sitting on a student government board, and I asked this question, and I got a lot of pushback for it because it's only because certain institutions came in, got their hands in the cookie jar, and said, "Hey, now we're going to take some of that money, tuition money too as well, and just tell you not how we spend it." And that's the problem too as well, because we don't have an auditing system within the student, not only just in the student government, but also at a public college and university level as well. And we need to start addressing all these problems head on.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think I understand where you're coming from there of being the cost as a barrier. But I also wonder, like, as you said, a lot of the times you don't know where that money is really going. So a lot of this times the money is actually going to a lot of the administration costs. A lot of these schools are having so many administrators added to it, counselors or people who are actually just running operations because schools are no longer just about education anymore. They do all these different activities to them, and that increases how much administration that they have to them. And so, as you've seen costs go up over time, that's been one of the biggest things. Faculty of administration compared to teachers themselves. The amount of administrators has skyrocketed in comparison. So I sometimes worry about throwing all that money at the administrators, just making it free rather than just trying to first regulate why is this so expensive in the first place, and then also helping people just have money to be able to afford that. One thing I've always wanted to know for the people who go for free college as the answer, I assume you also support free universal pre-K?
Yeah, I do, because free universal pre-K, and then universal K through 12 has been the cornerstone in California. Because when we actually allocated our tax dollars to fund 12 through K through 12, it saved a bulk of us money in terms of uh, providing the resources to the teachers and to the school administrators and just to the taxpayers themselves. But then you also have this problem about the auditing thing too as well. Is that actually money getting spent on getting the supplies, getting the maintenance for the schools to be being upkept? Is everybody being in communication with each other in terms of how do we run the school efficiently and the education system too as well? Um, with universal with universal pre-K, it's a whole different debate, because now you're figuring out how does that get included too as well, because you got Head Start programs across the nation. Some are private, some are public, some are a mixture of both, and you the the parents that I talk to do want universal pre-K, because they cannot afford to buy a babysitter when they're going to school or go to work. So you want to have a sense where we can educate the young, so it saves us money in the long run towards the end. So when they turn 18, we can shift the burden to them in some instances where they can get a job and then go to school. But then another problem is when you go to the community colleges, um, the the student has to figure out how to pay for that too as well.
Mm.
So it's a multifaceted problem going on in terms of education, and it's just a tricky battle which one you want to prioritize first, universal pre-K, K through 12, or universal uh, public free colleges and universities. And right now, we always said, we said decades ago that universal K through 12 was the mandate. We're going to make sure that gets fully paid. That's going to be accessible for everybody to go to, regardless of income, regardless of what class status you have.
Hmm.
You are entitled to go to these public schools and have a decent education. So now the new battle is, are we going to apply that across universally with pre-K and then with public colleges and universities?
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you there that the goal is to be able to expand it. We've already socialized some of the cost for a certain level of education. My priority, I tend to say if you're going to aim for education, you aim young because that's when people, A, are the most able to learn. That is when kids are the best equipped to be able to learn. It's also when they are the least able to take care of themselves. So, as you said beforehand, it's a real burden on parents to have to bear the cost of trying to get someone who's like daycare instead of actual education. As well, there's a problem where it's not like when you're in college and you could potentially work for yourself to help afford some of your education costs currently. If you're someone in the pre-K era, you're not working, you're a toddler. So that's kind of also hard. It's not two people who could potentially work to afford the cost. It's only one person, the household, the parents, being able to afford that pre-K cost unless we socialize it to the government.
Right.
So I'm
I,
curious, do you think currently the higher priority is the higher education, or do you think that we can't let these be competing issues?
I guess that's the moral question. Do we want to go to prioritizing uh, universal tuition free colleges and universities, or do we want to prioritize universal pre K? Um, it just depends on uh, what state wants to mandate first, because it's going to be a state rights issue. I seem to believe, but if you mandate it nationally, that's a whole different discussion, and it has to be uniform by all the states agreeing to paying for universal pre-K and public colleges and universities. But that's a bigger fight.
I mean, one point I would make for that is when we asked a question to the people, should we educate every baby and child in this country? I think there's going to be a lot that say yes. But then when
Yeah,
you ask
yeah,
them, should every single person go to college and university? I think the answer is some, most, not all. And that's
right.
one of the things where I think we can fundamentally have this divide. And I tend to prioritize having it done earlier because we can all say, yeah, kids should be educated. The older people, if you want to start a business, you want to go serve in the army, you want to go do many a task in this world, you might not end up in college and university. Some people might do trade school or vocational. And that's why I feel like the big topic of education is how do we make our existing education work? And that's why I love the first idea that you have of having some basic standard of rights so that it's like uniform in all areas so it's not dependent on your zip code of how well funded your school potentially is so that everyone has well funded facilities so that they already provide you a textbook instead of you having to buy it yourself. I think those all make sense. I do you think what would be the reason we should be focusing just on colleges and universities
Well,
instead of primary
I,
education or pre-K?
I would go to first the pre-K part first, because I do think that that would be the most agreement amongst everyone across the board on the political spectrum. Because libertarians, conservatives, socialists, anarchists, you name it, they all want universal pre-K. They know this, they want this, but you know how our broken Congress is that they rather prioritize their profits for the multiple industries inside
Yeah.
um, the education department. So, like, the major part was the textbooks. Then you got the administrative costs too as well, and their politics too as well, trying to figure out what they want to prioritize who gets what money and whatnot. Then you got the sports program, and that like
Yep.
U of L has, and they're millions and millions of dollars paying
Mm-hmm.
one person about like $20 million a year. It seems like. So it's just like we're living in very ludicrous times, where we're we're divided in a sense of how we wanted to take on this education fight, but we're all united on one concept, which is we need to educate the kids.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to uh, agree across the board, universal pre-K should be the first fight to go on the next couple of years. But then you got this whole new contingent from the last like 10 years, which now we're going to talk about the uh, tuition-free community college. That's been the longest standing debate for the last 40 years. How do we pay for education? How do we make it free and accessible for everyone? Because back before, I guess, our time, before we were born, our parents and grandparents were basically, their tuition money got subsidized.
Mm-hmm.
So they were basically paying like 30, 20, $15 per credit. And now we're up to the point where we're paying $250 to $200 per credit, and we're basically asking to go back to the 70s and 60s in terms of where the tuition rates were, and say no, we want to go back to paying a small amount of money for tuition, and in return, what we're asking for is a guaranteed job afterwards after education. And right now, the job market doesn't seem to dictate that all the time, because it's in flux, but also it's very chaotic. Because you got certain areas where people are successfully in the financial industry making tons of money, but then you got educators making less than like $50,000 a year, and that's a gross problem with inequality right now in our times.
Mm. Yeah, no, I hear you there. One of the things that I wanted to try and wrap on this subject is in terms of college education. I think we've all agreed that we should try and educate our kids, and we should try and provide as much as we can upward. How much education do you think we should try to provide? Obviously, undergraduate, we expect people going for an associate degree, it's expected around 2 years. For a bachelor's degree, it's going to be 4 years. If they're getting a grad degree, it might go up to 6 or 8 years. Doctorate, going further for a PhD. What do you think should be the point of education that is provided by the federal government, free of charge on the tuition front?
All right, I seem to think that would be the consensus right now. This building in the last like 5 years, it's going to be just the community colleges right now, because the cost expensive of people going to community colleges has essentially risen in the last 5 years, and so if we're going to have to make the compromise on not making the not making the public universities be tuition free, well, at least start at the community colleges, because that's where the burden of the debt's coming from for the students, and we need to make that a priority. So if you're going for a 2 year associate's degree, but it's taking longer than expected, like 3 to 5 years to get that associate degree, I would say let's make it free for them, and make sure that they can have the time and the freedom to go to the community colleges, take their classes, pass those classes without any burden of any debt whatsoever. And as a former community college student and a former student government official, that's been my main passion, is having students just go to class, take the classes, get to know new people, have the college life experience, and not be burdened by socioeconomic debt and they worry about to pay the debt after you get out of college. So that would be the first priority if that ever happens, is have public colleges, public community colleges be free first. Because if the mandate is we want more people to get into the workforce, but they had to first get an associate degree, I would agree to that. Let's get that done, so we can actually have more people being paid into the system and have more tax revenue coming in for the states and local governments, so it can actually pay for stuff like, say, our public roads, pay down the cost of our healthcare, and et cetera, et cetera. Because it's a domino effect. If you provide services for free and you subsidize those services, then in return, you use that tax money that didn't subsidize other services for, like, say, for the police force or for the firemen, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I strongly agree with you. First, that community colleges have to be the priority. I think first they are an effect of localizing it, where basically a lot of these communities have their own. It's very close to where they may have went to high school, while a lot of these public colleges still are in communities further away. And so this kind of concentrates a lot of this brain drain away from communities rather than investing funds more locally across this country. So I think that's a really big step. I also agree that it's more practical because we're investing in less necessary years of it. It's usually 2 years compared to 4. Usually there's less genetic requirements. It's a vehicle that a lot of people use to try and transition careers or see if they want to go and find more education. I do agree that's a great first priority. One thing before we go into your final and top priority of Medicare for All, I wanted to know what you thought about the idea of being able to provide free med degrees for people who go to public universities. Do you think that's something that should be explored to be able to provide enough doctors for the healthcare system?
Yeah, because the major concern that's happening right now in real time is that coronavirus is happening, and so we are. I feel like we're woefully unprepared for this pandemic that's happening right now, and we need to start prioritizing what comes first. Do we put the hands of creating new doctors and new nurses into the system so we can actually, cover the vast of the problem of the widespread infection we're having, and then two, mandating that a lot of the community colleges pull their resources into first the healthcare sector to employ and also to train these new nurses and doctors, because we need a public health services that actually needs an overhaul and but just to have a better structure, because a lot of the money that's being pulled right now is being pulled into administrative costs, and it's not being pulled towards to the people who are educating or the people that need the transition money to go to the job they want to go to. That's where I think we should be going. But in the moment right now, we are just having a tug of war fight between who's going to decide to lead this crisis and who's going to prioritize what money to fight this crisis. And so there are solutions out there, but we have to come to a consensus right now. I feel like we're divided in the sense of how we solve a national crisis right now.
Yeah, and I think it's sad though, because we can have pragmatic minds like us debate on what the technical solution is to do that, or even the actual experts who work at like the CDC, but we don't have these people in charge of these crises right now. We have Mike Pence. So yes, that's a little bit of a panic, but we'll get into that more in our final segment. We're going to talk a little bit about Medicare for All and how we can actually transform our healthcare system when we're going through something like a pandemic. So Rosebud, stick around, come back in our third part, and we're going to talk through Kiko's #1 priority, Medicare for All.